Quick housekeeping. We are recording this conversation, so we'll make sure to send you the recording if you have to drop off early for any reason today. So don't worry, you won't miss anything. We'll be also doing a recap of the highlights of today's conversations in our newsletter and in our community. If you're not yet in our community, don't worry, we'll make sure to send you where you can join us right after the event as well. All right, friends, I'm super excited to have you both here for our first webinar of 2023. Last year, we did, I think, overall like 5 to 6 events like this one. Our goal is to do many more, talk about all the topics that are hot in our mind. And I'm thrilled to launch this year with this really, really fun topic that we're going to talk about today. We've had over 70 questions submitted in the registrations for all of you. So we'll have to talk fast. Otherwise, I'm not sure how we're going to fit into the 50 minutes that we've allocated, but I'm very excited. To start with, I would love to introduce you to our speakers. So Jenny, can you tell us a bit about yourselves, a bit about you and the work you do?
Hey everyone, Jenny Weigle. My consulting practice is Jenny.Community. I specialize in helping enterprise brands get their very first customer community going. So that's exciting. Yeah, and I'm thrilled to be here. This is the first time I ever get to present with the Evan Hamilton, y'all. I'm so psyched.
Amazing. Thank you, Jenny. We're so excited to have you here. And Evan, over to you. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and the work you do in our industry?
Sure. My name's Evan Hamilton. My personal brand is Overdue for a Haircut. And I've been building communities professionally for over 15 years at companies like CMX, Reddit, now at HubSpot. And I'm super excited to present with Jenny. Jenny and I, we spent a lot of time chatting, and Jenny's a favorite in my newsletter. So this will be good.
Amazing. Well, we're really psyched to have you both here. So let's get started. Jenny, my first question is for you. Tell me a bit about your community story and what made you think about, starting your personal brand to begin with.
I find this fun. The idea of your personal brand in essence is kind of marketing yourself in some ways, and sometimes you have a reason you need to do it, and sometimes you don't. And I really kicked it up when I launched my own practice, which was in June 2021. And I have a lot of fun with doing it. For me, I'm constantly looking out for connections with different people. Maybe that's the extrovert in me. I don't know. But to me, connection and community are so closely aligned. But if I'm going to find people to be in community with and make connections, I knew I'd had to get more of me out there and let people know who I was. And so, yeah, you'll find me pretty active on LinkedIn and Instagram, and I'm taking a break on Twitter right now because I don't really know what the future of that is. I miss it though. And then my Substack is kind of where I go and just dump whatever's in here. It can make sense and it might not, but I guarantee you it'll be interesting.
I love it. Evan, over to you. Do you remember the first piece of content you ever worked on, and what kind of inspired you to get started?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I remember the first piece, but I'm the flip side of Jenny. I am an introvert, and I've always been a big fan of writing because I'm not big on the putting myself out there personally, but I like to introspect and write things down. And I really came into the industry when blogging was a big thing, not as a commercial tool, but just as everybody had a blog and talked about what they were doing and their favorite music. And so I think my first posts were probably just sort of, here's what I'm doing, here's what's going on today, far before that became a giant industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a quick follow-up question. You mentioned that you kind of started sharing your thoughts. I think, Jenny, you kind of mentioned that, you just have a place where you share your thoughts as well. So what, let's say I'm a community professional and I'm building amazing things. I had a lot of thoughts, right, that I would love to share. Where do I start, right? Like, how can I get started to get my thoughts, my thought process out there?
Well, go for it, Evan.
I mean, I think just write, which is the dumb answer and going to annoy people, but you are not a writer if you don't write. And I'm stealing this and misappropriating it from somebody, but this idea of you just have to start doing the thing. Actually, I recommend a book by the singer for Wilco called How to Write One Song. And his whole thing is, if you're not writing a song, you're not writing a song. And so he just makes time to write songs. And he says, yeah, I might do 4 hours and it's all junk, but if I didn't spend 4 hours, I definitely wouldn't have anything good. And so I think that for me is the first part, is just doing it. And you're not going to be good at it probably right away. Great if you are, congratulations. But you're going to get better as you do more of it. And you'll start to figure out what works for you. And that's overly simplifying it. There's a lot more, and Jenny will probably follow up with something much smarter. But I think if you don't just start doing it, you're going to spend a lot of time worrying about it. And then the more you think about it, then it's scarier to dip your toe in versus just getting out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree. Jenny, what do you think? How can folks get started when they're thinking about their personal brand?
I think you should really get clear, spend a little time reflecting on what is your why? Why do you feel like you need a personal brand? There's a number of reasons. Some people might do it because of they want to excel in their career and move up at a certain company or career path, or maybe they're on the job search and they're just trying to promote themselves. I remember also being a little bit more active on social media when I first moved to Los Angeles, because I was trying to make connections and just meet new friends. And now my personal brand is so closely tied with the business I am continuing to build here that is a big part of my why. So I want to pose this question to the people in the chat. When it comes to your personal brand, what is your why? Why are you doing it? Do you feel like it's a should? Does it feel more like natural to try to build on your personal brand? But I'd love to hear about your why. And that's really clear, because I think when you're at a point where you need to start formulating a real plan around your personal brand, knowing your why will help you keep a focus on what's going to be important and what you're trying to achieve. And then, like Evan said, and then don't hesitate, start doing things, like start getting out there, because yes, you can sit on an idea all the time and think, oh, somebody already posted something about this. Oh, but this resource is already over here. Oh, get out of it. Just do it. Just be you, be authentic, and get something going. And that's the key, to just start in some way. And if you're striving for perfection, guess what? Perfection doesn't exist. So just get started, like Evan said.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that the feeling of kind of getting overwhelming and getting stuck, and that's something that Jamie mentioned in the chat as well. I think that can be really difficult, especially if you're getting started, right? Because let's be honest, there is some content out there, right? There's other folks doing this, but it all comes down to finding your voice, right? And that's actually kind of a nice bridge to my next question. Jenny, what was it like for you to find your voice, and why do you think like that's important in building a personal brand?
If one of the intentions of your personal brand is to again make connections, like mine is, then I just want to represent myself as authentically as possible. So I think people can see through this on social media. They can see when you're not being authentic about something. So if you're going to do this right, put yourself out there, be a little vulnerable and state your truth. If you're hurting people's feelings in the process, maybe take a step back and think about how you're stating some truths. But yeah, I do a lot of self-care and work on my mental health, and that I think helped me get to a place where I feel comfortable saying a lot of things on social media about my life, about making an ask that maybe I wouldn't normally feel comfortable with. And I think, and I hope that comes through in all the different ways people are engaging with me and coming across my personal brand.
Absolutely. And I think it's always a journey, right? And it doesn't come up right away, because there's a lot of things, a lot of thoughts of should and must, but then once you kind of take the time to really dig deep, I think you'll be able to find it. Evan, what was that journey like for you? Finding your own voice when building your personal brand, and how can folks kind of, dive deeper into this process?
Yeah, I'm going to try not to sound like a broken record and say just right, but I think you have to do bad stuff to know what good stuff is. And the fact of the matter is, nobody's going to remember you wrote a post that wasn't very good. They're just not going to read it. They're going to start reading it and say, I'm not going to read this. They're not going to remember that you wrote something that someone else has already talked about. They'll remember the great stuff. And I'm also a songwriter, and it's very much the same in that bucket, where it's like, yeah, you write some stuff based on things you've heard, right? You're like, oh, I'm gonna make a song like Tom Petty. And then you're like, I feel like I'm doing a bad impersonation of Tom Petty. I don't think this is my song. And then you do another one that maybe has some of that influence, but you're adding something else in, and eventually you land on something that's yours. And I have a specific way of singing that I have no idea how I got to, because it came from like imitating other people for 5 years until I ended up having my own voice. And so I do think there's some element of just like, you have to try different things, and maybe intentionally. There are writers and musicians who will actually intentionally, I've heard about people taking a novel and typing out the words of the novel, just to kind of understand how the flow of the novel works, how that writer thinks, not because they want to exactly replicate them, but because they want to understand that rhythm. And so I think just at the beginning, don't hesitate to try a bunch of different things, because probably it's not going to be one of those things that's right for you. It's going to be an amalgamation of this thing here and this thing here. But if you immediately lock yourself into a format or a style, you're going to feel that you have to stay in that format versus, slowly iterating your way towards what works for you.
Yeah, running experiments. I love that. And you mentioned that, you're going to notice once you write and you start doing stuff, you notice the things that are good and that are bad. And I think that's kind of very linked to your voice, right? You're going to see the things that really don't sound like you, right? And then you're going to read the things that you wrote and you'll be like, hey, like that's a good, like I had a good thought here, right? And I think that's connected to finding your own voice. And I think what we all mentioned on, a lot of content being out there, following on other folks, what they're doing, all of us log in every single day and we're hungry for more, right? We're excited to learn more. We're excited to connect with other people. We're excited to see where everyone is in their journeys. And I think the journey is like very unique to each individual. So sharing that with the world, I think, I don't think there's more authentic or on voice than doing that. So just a little encouragement there for everyone that, it's okay to be at the beginning and it's okay to be doing this for some time. All right, friends. Let's talk about, building a personal brand can take some time, right? And it's a lot of experimentation, a lot of putting yourself out there. What are the pros and cons of building our personal brand? Evan, what do you think? What can be the pros, but also what are the cons of investing the time and energy in building this?
Yeah, I mean, practically from a career standpoint, knowing more people, having a connection with more people is super beneficial. I know that I have this network I can reach out to if I lose my job, or if I need help with something. Hey, who's dealing with a super user program? There's a lot of professional benefits you can get from having a network, and it doesn't have to be giant, but just having a network more than just the people that you work with. Having 10 people who you're connected with, who you share things with, that's valuable. So you don't have to think about it being massive. The other part that I found really valuable, and part of why I love doing talks, is it gets me to think critically about what I'm doing. And there's this quote, I won't remember the quote, but the approximate quote from Seth Godin is like, he's not great at any of these things, but he's really good at observing them. And the people doing them don't have the time. They're doing them. So he just watches and he says, here's what you're doing, and shares that with the world. And I think we're all so busy doing what we're doing, we don't necessarily capture those lessons. We don't necessarily turn them into frameworks. And that can be detrimental down the line when you're like, man, how did I do that thing at one time? Or like, what is the through line of the work I've done that has made it successful? And so I've found that writing about it forces me to actually take the time to say, well, what is my philosophy here? Or what are the tactics I've done here? And that's very beneficial.
Very cool. Jenny, how do you feel about pros and cons in building your personal brand?
So as Evan was talking, I was like, yes to everything. And I think cons, it's actually hard in a way to think of a con, because I think it's just great, to be building your personal brand. I love how we've got a very active chat here, and and Todd brought up a good point. Todd Nilsson says in the chat, downsides, you can brand yourself into a corner, and another possible drawback is too much focus on branding over actually closing business. So I think what Todd's alluding there is time management. And I would also say, when you get very deep into this work, one of the cons can be the self-doubt that might creep into you and literally keep you from being productive, because it's happened before to me. Anyone else in the chat, please let me know if it's happened to you. Yeah, thought so. Because I feel like it happens to everyone. And I just feel like, I know we're going to talk a little bit on this in a couple of questions, so I won't go too much into it. But if you're not prepared to know how to deal with self-doubt, that can definitely be a con. It can put you in a funky place too when you're, and stop everything, which it has done before for me at times. So self-doubt, it's going to be tricky to manage, and it's going to be experienced differently by everyone. Look at all the, we got, okay, a lot of people feeling the same. Y'all are validating me, and I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it can be, putting yourself out there can be always scary. And I also love the point that you made on, building a brand for the sake of building a brand, not doing actual work, right? Not actually, learning something new that you can later on share. I think there is always a very fine line there. So, making sure that you do what's best for you, and also, what gives value to the folks that decided to follow you, right? Like, why did they come there? And, what are they looking to learn from you as well? All right. Building a personal branding community. I'm excited to ask both of you, why are you excited about this industry? Why is it, now the right time to build your personal brand as a community builder, as a community manager? Jenny, what do you think about this question?
I mean, I wouldn't be doing this work unless I was excited about our industry. So there's a lot to be excited about. There are a lot of people building brands and touching on subjects in ways that have not been discussed before. If I can, I'd love to share like maybe one or two of some of my favorite brands of people. I got to give a shout out to, I see she's here, Venia Logan. Venia, I think you have a phenomenal personal brand, and if y'all don't know about it yet, go check her out. In some spaces, she's dubbed the community scientist. Most recently, Scott Wilder called her the professor of community science. These are names that are given to her, not that she didn't come up with. So how great is she doing at her own personal branding? And just to give you all a hint, that she really explores an intersection of community with academia, studies, research, unlike anything I've seen before. So, kudos to Venia on what you're doing. People like Venia excite me about this field, and also are representative of the opportunity there is in community. And also got to give a shout out to Max Pete. Max Pete I've dubbed him the community life coach. If you're not following him on LinkedIn, you should, because his posts are just so uplifting and just speak to me in some parts of the day in ways I'm like, I needed to hear that, Max. So yeah, he's my community life coach, and I'm sure he holds that role for many other people. And what I love about his personal brand, he's just always helping. He admits when he's curious too. So, and I think most of us know Max has only been in this field for a little over a year or so, maybe a year and a half, because he shares so much of himself. So I love that he tells us when he's curious. I love that he shares his wins with us. And I think all of those contribute to great personal brands. Yeah. So those are some of the things that are making me excited about community today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And happy you're sharing some of our friends here as well. So thank you. Thank you for that. Evan, over to you. What excites you about the community industry, and why do you think it's a really, why is it a good idea to build your personal brand as a community manager?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I'm in community is because we're in the business of creating win-wins, and it just makes me very happy that that's what I get to do every day. I get to sign on and create a situation that helps a company and helps people. Not everyone gets to say that, right? A lot of people are extracting value. I think we get to create value. And so that's why I'm in community. I think why I'm so excited to continue to think about this industry and read about this industry and talk about this industry is because we're really just at the beginning. And I think folks say like, oh, well, community's been around in proper form for 15 years, and people argue it's much older than that. Haven't we figured it all out? And absolutely not. I think we've just gotten to a definition of community, just barely. I think we've just gotten kind of the foundations of like, this is what makes these spaces work. But I think the number of ways you can use community, how you can infuse it in an organization, how you successfully build a community, there's so much more to unpack there, and it's always changing. I've seen a lot over these 15 years, and so there's just always more. I always think, I'm gonna get bored of doing my newsletter. It's gonna start just being the same old stuff, and I actually don't. There's the occasional week like this week where I didn't find anything, but every week there's somebody with a brilliant new perspective that I hadn't thought of. And so, yeah, it's a great time to be involved, because now we're taking it from the, hey, let's just pitch community as a legitimate thing to let's actually get technical about it and take it to the next level.
Yeah, and I think that's so visible from both of the things that the two of you are doing, right? The general excitement, the general belief in our industry. And I think that's also very crucial, right? You can see folks that kind of jump from industry to industry to industry, trying to kind of build their personal brand. And I think it gets much harder if you don't truly believe, right, in what you're building. If you're not excited about not just building your personal brand, but also, you know, supporting others to growing their following and their thought leadership. So I think that comes across from both of the amazing work that two of you do. All right, friends, let's move on to, because we got tons and tons of audience questions. Let's move on to those questions. And the first one I have here is from Kristen. So Jenny, I'll kind of try to always do one question per speaker, but if you want to hop in and add anything, please feel free to do. So Jenny, I'll say this question to you. And Kristen asks us, how much time should I set aside weekly to build my personal brand?
This was a hard one because I don't think there's any magic number, and it all depends on what people have availability in a day. You know, like, I mean, you know, Evan's got family and so a lot of the responsibilities, you know, in his day in addition to work, and I've got my stepdaughter here like half the week, so it's like everyone's gonna have different schedules that contribute to what the time they have. So I'll tell you what works for me. I calendar 30 minutes every weekday and on some weekends, but it's definitely for every weekday for myself to go and interact on social channels. This is not necessarily me posting, that's outside of the 30 minutes, but I want to interact. I want to read what people have posted. I want to watch the videos they've posted. I want to engage in their content. I want to ask them about it. And I think that helps my personal brand, because I want people to know that I'm listening. I'm making time to, you know, see what other people are saying out there and not just trying to like push my messages out. So I am able to dedicate 30 minutes. If you can't, maybe if you do that every day, maybe you can put 10 minutes. And for me, it works that it is blocked on my calendar. So maybe that's another tactic that might work for people out there. But Evan, do you have a certain amount of time you focus on yours?
No, I'm jealous, but I do think it is about building a habit, whether it's carving out time for yourself or, you know, frankly, I send a newsletter every Monday that has 3 community links. And so that forces me to, okay, it's getting closer to the end of the week. I need to make sure I'm reading some more things because I got to find 3 good ones. And then usually, you know, after I put my eldest to bed on Sunday night, I'm writing it up. So that habit helps a lot. And then the other habit for social media, somebody was like, how do you plan out all these posts? And I was like, oh, I definitely don't do that. What I do is the moment I have a thought or the moment I encounter something at work, I just write it down. And sometimes I have a very firm thought about this thing. And sometimes I'm exploring this thing, trying to figure it out. What do you all think? But building that habit has meant that I don't have to spend a bunch of time thinking about it and capturing it somewhere. It just goes kind of from my brain through a filter to, you know, compose it a little bit to the world. And that's also, again, helpful for me to just like get the thoughts out of my head and bounce them off some other people. So I think figuring out what the habit is that works for you. And I think everyone's different. For me, it's the moment it comes in my brain. For some people, it might be top of every hour. I'm going to take 5 minutes. I don't think it has to be a ton of time. I think it's more about just having it be second nature for you rather than, oh gosh, I haven't done it this week. I should really make some time, because then already it's becoming stressful.
Absolutely.
We're getting some great suggestions in the chat too. And it's like Heather Went says she uses a Trello board to keep organized with hers. Clara, this would be a great question to pose to people in our chat. I want to know, how much time do you all spend on your personal brand per week?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jenny, for that. I was just gonna say, and I love that the two of you have kind of a bit of a different approach. And I think everything works a little different, right, to folks. I used to have a reminder. I read somewhere that it's really good to post on LinkedIn on Sundays, because in the evening, everyone's like scrolling to get ready for work. And then I used to get so stressed from not posting on Sundays. I actually never posted. I just got stressed. So I think I'm kind of more on the side of when it comes to my brain, I do post it, and I always have my Apple Notes open with me on my phone, on my computer, and that's kind of my like source of truth. But I think just figuring out a schedule that works for you. And yeah, we have folks posting here. So let us know how you manage this process, how you time manage when you're working on your content, on your personal brand. We'd love to hear from you in the chat. And I have a first question in the chat as well. So Evan, I'll ask this one for you. What platform would you recommend for beginners, right? Should I post on LinkedIn, on Medium, on Substack, right? Is there a platform where, where most of the conversations happen at the moment I think probably in community in general?
Yeah, I mean, a few months ago, I would have said Twitter, but I am also taking a Twitter break because I don't like enabling bullies. I think there's a lot of action on LinkedIn, but I think ultimately, the most beneficial thing you can do is own your data. And we're in a world where other people love to own our data. And so I would think of those as distribution channels, but at some point, and it might not be right away if you haven't found your voice yet, you haven't found your cadence, but at some point I would recommend a newsletter, or I think Substack lets you actually keep your data. I could be wrong about that. Something where you are actually keeping those contacts, where you are not at the mercy of their algorithm, so that you are not in a place where all of a sudden Elon Musk blows up Twitter, or a service shuts down, or they start deprioritizing text posts, and then you're in a tough spot because every creator has gone through that. And it just happens again and again and again and again. Every time there's a boom where Facebook starts promoting videos, at some point there's a bust where they stop. And so you really have to eventually have some method of owning that audience. And again, even if it's a small one, I'm not saying you need a multi-thousand person newsletter. It might be 50 people who just really enjoy what you're writing.
Absolutely. I also think that there comes this aspect of choosing a platform that you're comfortable with, right? Like you should probably, if you're working with a platform where you're subscribing to other people, where you're every day, it's a lot easier than building an audience on a completely new platform that you've never used before, right? That said, maybe you're not using any platform, so it will be a whole new adventure for you. But I do think, Evan, to what you mentioned, kind of making sure that you can connect to folks and you can stay connected even if something happens in the future, if your brand takes off and it becomes a really viable part of your daily work, of your business. I think that's important on that side as well. Jenny, any platform thoughts before we hop on to another question?
Well, Clara, you read my mind, because I wanted to tell Nadia in response to her question. It's a great question. To go with the platform that resonates with you. And I love writing, so Substack was a good fit for me to express my thoughts. But if you feel more comfortable, like just verbally speaking things out, and you're comfortable with quick videos, recording a video of some sort, maybe Instagram or TikTok is a better platform for you. But to what Evan said earlier, like if you picked a platform and you're kind of dreading, not like actually posting on or doing something, maybe you haven't picked one that actually, lights you up or aligns with you. So take the time to figure out what that is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly what Valentina just said in the chat, right? Like see what platform fits with your brand. And I think that's very true, right? Where you naturally spend more time on, I think that makes the sense. I've been very angry at myself for the last couple of years for never building up my Twitter brand. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I would say weekly, daily, probably. And I've never learned how to Twitter. And now I feel like I don't have to. So thank you all for sharing those thoughts there. All right, moving on to our next question. Do you have any tips on how to overcome imposter syndrome? I have a feeling it's incredibly common in our community industry. Michaela asks us. Evan, over to you. Any tips on imposter syndrome? Did you ever have to deal with it, or did you ever talk to anyone who dealt with it?
Yeah, I deal with it all the time. Everyone does. And in some ways, that's actually how I get over imposter syndrome, is that what I've learned is nobody in the world knows what they're doing. Like truly everyone is making it up as they go. And, I've held CEOs I've worked for in this high esteem of like, oh, they're a brilliant person, and then seen them do something where I'm just like, oh, you completely misunderstand human dynamics, or, how social media works or whatever, and realize, okay, A, not everyone knows everything, and B, most people are making most of it up. And that's not an insult to anyone. That's just like, we're all figuring it out. So I think that's part of it. I think also community, again, is far from baked. There's a ton to figure out here. There's frankly a ton changing. And so, don't feel like, oh, it's all been said before, because there's new things happening. And also, personal experiences are super relevant. Writing here's the 5 ways to build a community post. Everyone's done that. Those are not the ones I generally include in my newsletter, because I'm like, yeah, okay, yet another, like, here's the 5 basics of building a community. And frankly, those are the posts that AI, ChatGPT, like, those are the posts they're going to write. They're going to look at what have 500 other people said about how you start a community. Great, I'm going to regurgitate that. What you can uniquely say is, here's the thing I did. Here were my takeaways from it. Here's how I might do that next time. And those are the posts that I get a ton of value from. And sometimes it's somebody who's like, I've been in community for 9 months and here's what I've done. And sure, they're still developing their style. They may not have knocked it out of the park, but they've learned things and they've shared what they've learned. And in some ways, coming at it from a fresh angle is really fascinating. When new people join my team, I'll say, hey, you are looking at this from a fresh angle. And so anything that looks weird, it's not because we're brilliant. It's because we've been doing it this way for too long and we don't see how broken it is. So tell me if we're doing something weird. And I think similarly, don't assume, well, everyone says that you should start a community in this way, and so why would I say something different? Just share your perspective, or even just your question. Hey, I'm questioning this thing. I don't know the answer. I think there's just a lot of different ways you can provide value that don't require you being, the best of the best of the best. And again, if you're in the trenches building, like, you may actually have, in some ways, more useful insights than thought leaders who are just talking about it in abstract.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that with us. Jenny, how do you feel about imposter syndrome? Any tips on overcoming imposter syndrome when you're building your personal brand?
It sucks. I'll say that. And I knew we'd be talking about this. That's why I didn't elaborate more on the self-doubt stuff earlier. But yeah, it does. It's self-doubt. You're putting yourself you're not trusting yourself in those moments, feeling that. And I've learned to accept it. To just accept it. And like Evan said, everyone feels it. I have seen some of my favorite authors state on podcasts that they have imposter syndrome. I've seen celebrities in interviews say that they have imposter syndrome. So I have come to just accept it. Now, it still means I'm feeling it. So I encourage you all to figure out what you need to do to navigate through imposter syndrome, because I don't think you can overcome it. I don't think you can make it go away, and there's not a solution for it. But if you can walk side by side with it and still, and still be productive and do what you need to do and work towards your goals, that is how you manage it. It is this friend, concept that will always be there, like on her shoulder. And when I accepted that, it was much easier for me to find ways to just operate with imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
I'm Jenny, and I operate with imposter syndrome.
Hi, Jenny.
I love that point, Jenny, and I want to build on it, because there was a TED talk that blew my mind like 10 years ago, which talked about stress not being a bad thing, and stress actually, like, feeling a sense of stress is our body preparing us for a situation. And traditionally, that situation would be like a saber-toothed tiger is about to eat us. And so we got to be all hopped up, ready to run away from the tiger. It's not as dramatic now, but it's our body preparing us. And that concept of not fighting it and being like, okay, body, like, thanks for trying to get me ready, has had a huge impact for me. And there's actually studies showing that people who think stress is bad for them are less healthy, and people who think stress is okay are more healthy. Crazy, like the power of your brain. And I think it's similar with imposter syndrome. As you said, Jenny, you can take that as, oh, this is something that I'm learning about. This is something that, like, at some point I'll understand this better. And I've really tried to reframe for myself when I realize I'm bad at something. I'm like, ooh, this is something I can get better at. In a year, I'm going to look back and be like, oh man, I've learned so much about that. It's an opportunity rather than a problem. And again, with content, it doesn't have to be, I know everything about this subject and here's my post about how to do it perfectly. Some of the more interesting posts are just, I'm observing this thing, maybe I'm challenged by it, and I'm trying to figure it out. There's a great post, I'm going to forget who posted it, but I'll find the link and plug it to my newsletter, with someone writing about, like, the best communities are ones that end. Should we kill our communities? And that was kind of the extent of the post. It wasn't, here's 5 ways to kill your community. It wasn't, here's exactly what every brand should do, but it really resonated with me. And I've been, like, sitting with that thought, and it was just them observing something and exploring it. So again, I think, as Jenny said, like, taking imposter syndrome by the hand and being like, cool, I see you there. You're showing me that, like, this is an area where I feel like I need to learn. And so let's go learn together and learn out loud.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I think, even if you kind of, like you said, follow through and make the post, write the thought, share the comment, right? Speak out loud. It 99.9% of the time, like you prove your imposter syndrome wrong, right? It's not that, it doesn't mean that it's going to disappear, but by doing what you originally wanted to do and not letting it get in the way, I think that can be one way to help as well. And we have so many folks sharing their stories in the chat. Thank you all for being so open with us, and I love reading all of them. Evan mentioned. So if you want to watch it and learn a bit more about stress and how to change your mindset around it, we have the link in the chat as well. And we had another question that I kind of wanted to circle back to, which was content, right? We mentioned that, if you're starting up, don't write the post that everyone's writing. Try and think of your story, your learns, your journey, share things that are in that way. Jenny, what type of content do you think that people should start posting when they're working on their personal brand as a community manager? Like, what type of content is available to us out there?
I mean, there's so much out there. So again, find what resonates with you, however you want to express what it is you want to say. I think it comes back to your why. Why are you building your brand? And why do you need to say this thing right now? What is it? And again, just being authentic. And I think a good thing to do to check yourself before you are posting something is the should test. Like, am I posting this because I feel I should, or because I genuinely want to? And usually if you genuinely want to, I think that that's expressing your authenticity. And even sometimes if you should, just go ahead and post it. But then if you're feeling a should, then you in some ways are giving into some kind of expectation of you out there, and which may or may not be true. And so, question the should. And yeah, so oh gosh, there's so many ways to start with content, and video, pictures, words, images, and or even just starting to like other people's things and get out there and feel comfortable interacting with others. That's a good first step into this world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thinking about the type of content you can post, but also interacting with other people. Evan, anything else comes to mind for you that's kind of a key ingredient to building a personal brand?
Yeah, I mean, again, I will say just finding the thing that works for you. I've found I love curating. And so my newsletter is about curation, and other people are writing big, long essays. And occasionally I like to do that, but it stresses me out to do that on the regular. And so I focus on curating. So I think your format should have to do with what's comfortable for you. And Jenny mentioned, interacting with other people. And I think that's part we haven't touched on too much, which is, part of your personal brand should be helping people. Like ideally your writing is helping people, but also there are people that don't post anything, but I'm like, oh, they're always lifting others up. They're always helping others. I mean, Max Pete is writing great stuff, but also he's out there making a job site for community managers who are looking for work. He's out there supporting people and checking in on them. That stuff goes a long way. And remixing people's content is also great. Maybe you read something and you're like, this is great, and I'm going to add to it, or I'm just going to like emphasize a point they made. There was a period in time where a lot of my blog posts were that, where I would just read something really interesting and be like, ooh, this is really cool. Here's a snippet from it that I think like really resonates with me. And again, that act of curation can be useful for people because there's so much content out there. And so as long as you're doing it in a way where you feel like you're adding value, don't hesitate to amplify other people's work.
Absolutely. And I think that value point is very true. And I find it oftentimes that I see folks creating the type of content in their personal brand that they were missing out there, right? Like a lot of the times I see folks like doing, hey, like I always wanted to read this. I always wanted to hear this, wanted to listen to this, right? I'm going to do it, right? And that can be pretty magical. Cool. All right. We have so many more questions for you all. I'm
Clara,
not sure how
can I respond to a comment in the chat here? So shout out to Rachel Luxembourg, who said, for me, it's not so much imposter syndrome. I've been doing this long enough. Rather, I feel like I've already said everything already, and I don't want to repeat myself. And Rachel, if I could offer you another perspective, I say do the repost something you've already posted. It also sounds like you've got like, a wealth of knowledge and maturity in this field. So your perspective is going to be very unique from a lot of people just entering this field. Evan, I'd love to know what you think about the repost. I have reposted content that I've made before. I've done it in a timely manner, like reposted it time of year that makes sense. But, Rachel, what are the odds that, everyone connected to you saw your post, hypothetically, last week about community predictions for the year? It didn't happen. Not everybody saw what you had to say. So I don't have a problem with reposts. I encourage them. I think it's a great way to, keep reiterating your message, maybe even build on a previous message that you posted. What do you think about that, Evan?
Yeah, I don't think there's a problem with that as long as it comes across as like, hey, I think this would be useful for you. A lot of times in my newsletter, there will be a post I'm sharing about Slack, and I'll be like, hey, by the way, I've ranted about Slack over here on my blog. If it's relevant, that makes sense. If it just feels like, oh, they're just reposting the same thing over and over, that's different. And I'll also say that, going back to the personal nature of things, like, yeah, Rachel hasn't written for years. I still deeply respect and think of Rachel all the time because she did that great writing and because she was a great friend and mentor early on in my career. And so that stuff, like, it lasts. When you are really providing value to people, it lasts. And so Rachel can coast by on a lot of the work that she did early on.
Now I want to hear what Rachel has to say.
Absolutely. We'll follow our comments here. But I think that's amazing. Thank you both for sharing that. And I think it also comes back to the idea of your personal brand does not just have to be your content, right? It can also be the way you interact with others, how you support others, word of mouth, what other people say. I think that's super, super important. All right, cool. Moving on to our next question from Alexandra. Where are you building my brand? I love this question. What are some free low cost tools I can use to help me build out my personal brand, the logo, my brand voice, researching competition, writing content, building the website? So we really want to hear kind of, what y'all have tested, what y'all have used. If you have any tips and tricks on tooling, we love talking about tooling. So I'll pass this question over to Evan. What are some best places to spend your money in building your personal brand?
I would love to know. So I think Jenny will answer this better than me, but I will say, there's a bunch of actually good free stock photo sites these days, as long as you cite where it came from and link back to it. So you can always, find good images to make your posts look good. Canva, you can do really nice things in Canva now. I mean, I'm going to pull it back in my day, but back in my day, it was like that copy of Photoshop that you got illegally where you were like struggling to make things not look terrible, and now it's super easy. And I wouldn't personally, and I would love, Jenny, like, please disagree with me here because your stuff is much more slick than mine, but I wouldn't over index on the visuals. I mean, I think it ultimately comes down to the content, and I've definitely shared things in my newsletter that looked terrible but we're just like, this is a good post.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Alexandra, I'm a big believer in coaching, and I've had some life coaches that have made such a world of difference for me. Now, do some life coaches, cost a lot of money? That's not what she was asking for. She was asking for free or, low cost. But even the ones that are, high ticket price to work with them usually have some kind of free resources on their website. If you follow them on social media, you might catch them giving, live advice or part of talks and everything that are very inspirational. So seek those out. And something else that you could do, Alexandra, is like if you find a couple people who are just like you and interested in expanding and building on your personal brand, but you don't have a budget for it, guess what? You could start a little community with each other and just, hold each other accountable, check in with each other, find out what are you doing for your personal brand? What are you doing over here? What worked for you? What didn't work? And, all just take some time to learn from each other. And that only costs time.
Yeah. And that one, actually, I was recently reading about how Mr. Beast, who's this huge YouTube star, that is part of what he did, is he brought together a group of his peers who were also trying to make it on YouTube, and they were just in a chat for like hours a day talking about what they're doing, being like, let's all try this one thing and see how it goes and crowdsource our learnings. Like, that's absolutely a really powerful thing to do.
Absolutely. Thank you both for the tips. I think I love what you both mentioned, and I think just not overthinking things, right? Not getting stuck in the analysis of the best tooling, of, you know, of kind of the part that's, I think, important, but also not the core, right? The core is that people want to hear from you. They want to learn about you, hear your story. So thank you both for sharing that. I want to do a last call on questions now live to all our listeners. If you have any final questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. And I have, in the meantime, another question here from Rosie. Rosie says, I love being a community manager, but I'm a social media introvert. How do I build a personal brand online that in a way that feels authentic and good? Jenny, I'll pass this over to you.
I might not be the best person to ask about introverted advice, but I will say I admire Rosie, and she's just another person who I think has a phenomenal personal brand in this field. Things I view from my perspective, where introverts like have a step up on me, is in the ability to take in and listen and probably think longer before responding. That's a skill I would love to have. And yeah, and kind of like assessing things holistically. And I know my mind works to look at something in pieces, and I have to really get in a space to step back and look at things holistically. Those are some of the observations I've seen where I think introverts are killing it. But Evan, you could probably speak better to this.
Yeah, I mean, this is Rosie Sherry asking this. Rosie's great.
Actually, it wasn't Rosie Sherry,
Okay.
but I love that Rosie has a brand that we automatically think of Rosie Sherry. But
Rosie's
it's actually
example.
A different Rosie.
But thank you, this Rosie, for the question.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was surprising. Yeah, I mean, I think it's about figuring out what is sustainable for you. Like, yeah, for me, I can only do so many calls a day. I'm an introvert. I need my quiet time, and so I try and spread them out. But you know, I find a ton of value in connecting one-on-one, and so that might be more your thing than big group conversations. And again, like, a lot of my deeper relationships with people are from those one-on-one calls, not from social media. I think also, you know, figuring out what voice doesn't feel too boisterous to you. If you don't like going out there and being like, the future of community is XYZ, just being like, I was observing this community doing this the other day, or like, a conundrum I've run into in my community is this thing. You know, I think there's a lot of different ways to communicate online. And again, that's why, like, I'm someone who like curates things and sends them out in a newsletter, because it's less often about me and more about, you know, lifting up other people's voices. And so I think play around with a couple different things. Again, I'll go back to start doing it and start trying it and just figure out what's comfortable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel like you touched on a very important point there regarding the type of posts people pull out, right, when they're thinking about them. And that's like, not everything that you post has to be revolutionary, right? Like, not everything has to be like the biggest blockbuster at the time. I think just sharing your thoughts as they are at that moment can also be very important. I feel like that can be kind of a part of the getting stuck process, where we just try to make sure that every post is the best one of them. So that's another thing I just kind of wanted to point out, that I feel like sometimes happen, well, at least to me. But I absolutely am on the introverted side of the circle. And I also learned that I need to respect my my time commitment, how much energy I'm able to give, and you know, making sure that I just always take time to myself as well. Cool. Well, we are right on time. Let me quickly check our chat to make sure if we have any questions, but it looks like we were able to answer all the questions that we had in the chat. Evan, Jenny, thank you so much for joining us to this conversation. It was so awesome to talk to you, to learn from you. I learned so much, and I really hope that that everyone in the audience learned as well. Thank you both so much for your time. If you don't follow Evan's newsletter or Jenny, please make sure you do. They're both, as they said, active on LinkedIn and have their own content going on as well. And thank you all so much for joining us today. This was such a fun conversation and a great way to start this year.
Thanks, Clara. Thanks, Evan.
Yeah,
and thank you
so
all.
much. This was so fun.
Wonderful. Thank you all, and have a great day. Bye.